How far would you go to keep a promise to someone who never came back? What if the one thing you've been avoiding your whole life was the only place that could bring you peace? And what if the name you thought you'd never hear again showed up out of nowhere on a stranger's chest? His boots still had desert dust caked deep into the seams, though he'd been stateside for more than a decade. The creak of old leather followed every step, as if the past refused to let go. Sam Whitaker didn't walk so much as he braced, every movement measured, deliberate, in a way only men who had seen too much could understand. Every morning he stood on the porch of his small farmhouse in rural Montana, facing a horizon he once fought to protect, and now tried to avoid. Sam was a man of quiet rituals: 2 eggs over easy, black coffee strong enough to scrape rust off metal, and the radio dialed to an old country station he never changed. The truck he drove was a '74 Chevy C10, sky blue but faded like a memory. And though the world around him had raced forward, Sam remained in a time that wasn't ready to let him go. Neighbors wave, he nods. They joke about how they never see him in town unless it's to buy motor oil or dog food. Probably think he's just another retired army lifer who's had enough of people and politics, but they don't see the way his hands tremble when the stars are too bright or the thunder too sudden. They don't know about the photograph hidden in the cigar box beneath his bed. 2 boys in uniform, one with his arms slung loosely over the other's shoulders, both grinning like fools. They don't know that only one of them made it home. Ben, his younger brother by 3 years, and the only soul who ever beat Sam in a foot race or a staring contest. They enlisted the same day, same base, different units. In the beginning, they wrote letters. But the last one Sam got was stained with oil and half-torn, dated weeks before Ben vanished during an operation near the Korangal Valley. The army called it MIA, missing, presumed dead, just paperwork and condolences. But Sam remembered the ache in his bones like it was yesterday. The VA kept calling, offering appointments, evaluations, services. He'd hang up before they finished reciting the benefits he'd never asked for. Hospitals made him skittish. Smelled too much like the medic tent in Kandahar. Echoed like the Humvee turret, where everything flickered white for a second too long. But lately, something had been off. His hands mostly, dropping things, shaking. That strange pressure in his chest, like a fist forcing his breath out. He blamed it on age, stress from repairs on the barn, or maybe the dog getting sick. Truth was, he was scared, not of dying, of what they'd find inside him, of giving them a reason to keep him for good. Then came Tuesday. He'd gone into Billings to pick up fencing wire and some feed when the pain caught him like shrapnel in the ribs. He inhaled sharp, but stayed on his feet. There was no way in hell he was going to the ER. So he drove back with the windows down, fingers white around the steering wheel, daring his body to fail on his own terms. That night, the chest tightness came with nausea and numbness down his left arm. Not even a man like Sam could ignore those signs and call them anything but what they were. Still, as he dialed 911, he made one thing clear. He wasn't getting out of the ambulance unless it rolled into the parking lot sideways. By the time they wheeled him into St. Joseph Regional Medical Center, Sam was pale and sullen. He refused to make eye contact, speaking only when necessary. Every question from the nurse was met with a grunt or silence. So until one small moment cracked the concrete he'd poured around his soul. The nurse was young, mid-30s maybe, tall, clean-shaven, steady hands. His badge clinked gently against his chest every time he leaned forward. "Sir, I'm going to place these leads to monitor your heart, okay? Just relax, you're in good hands." Sam nodded once, eyes drifting, and then something in his gaze sharpened, locked. Not at the nurse's face, not at the clipboard, but at the hospital badge clipped to the man's scrubs. There, printed in black block letters beneath the hospital logo, was a name Sam hadn't said out loud in over 16 years. Benjamin Whitaker. RN Sam's breath caught mid-throat, his whole body frozen as if time itself had jammed. "You," his voice came cracked and rust-covered. "Your name, where do you get that name?" The nurse hesitated, surprised by the sudden intensity. "It's my name. My dad gave it to me. Said it used to belong to someone he owed his life to." Sam's mouth opened, but no words came. His chest tightened again, but this was different. Not pain. Something just beneath it, like the floodgates for a grief he never properly let in. Then he saw it. A small tattoo on the nurse's inner forearm, right where the skin folds, a pair of boots, rifle, helmet, the battlefield cross. Sam had one of his own. His fingers trembled as he pointed. "Your dad. What was his name?" "My father's name was Andrew Gelman, served in 3rd Battalion 75th Ranger Regiment, Afghanistan, 2009. He told me he wouldn't be alive if not for a soldier named Ben Whitaker." The words hit like mortar. Sam felt everything inside him shift, memories breaking loose like ice off a thawing river. Suddenly, the lights felt too bright, the room too loud. But in the middle of all the chaos churning through his chest, one single truth began to surface, cold and staggering. Ben Whitaker had saved this man's father. And somehow his name lived on, not just in memory, but in blood, in a stranger's pulse, in a badge that now refused to stop speaking. Sam leaned back against the gurney, and for the first time in 15 years, he let the tears come. Not just because he had questions, but because for the first time, he had hope that somewhere out there his brother's story wasn't over. Not everything that goes missing stays gone. Sam Whitaker remained on the gurney, his weathered hands gripping the thin hospital sheet as if it were the only thing anchoring him to the present. His chest rose and fell unevenly, not from the pain that had brought him here, but from the weight of a name, Benjamin Whitaker, etched on a stranger's badge. His brother's name. A name he hadn't spoken aloud in over a decade, a name that lived only in the quiet corners of his mind, now stared back at him like a ghost that refused to stay buried. The tears that had slipped down his face moments ago were no longer just a release. They were a crack in the dam he'd built around his grief, and now the flood was coming whether he was ready or not. He looked at the nurse again, this young man with steady hands and kind eyes, who bore the name Ben Whitaker with a casual ease that felt like a punch to Sam's gut. How could someone carry that name without knowing the weight of it? How could it just be a name to him, when to Sam it was everything, every laugh, every fight, every promise made under a desert sky that neither of them could keep? His throat tightened, and he felt the familiar burn of guilt, the kind that had gnawed at him since the day he came home alone. He should have been there. He should have fought harder to find Ben. He should have done something other than just survive. "Are you okay, sir?" The nurse, Ben, leaned in slightly, his voice soft but firm, the kind of tone that had probably calmed 100 patients before Sam. "I can get you some water or call someone if you need a minute." Sam shook his head, the movement jerky, almost angry. "No, I'm fine." But his voice betrayed him, rough and broken like gravel underfoot. He wasn't fine. He hadn't been fine in 16 years, and seeing that name now, hearing it tied to a story of survival that wasn't even Ben's, made him feel like the world was playing some cruel trick. Why now? Why here, in a place he'd fought so hard to avoid? The hospital smells, antiseptic, sterile, cold, pressed in on him, reminding him of medic tents and blood-soaked sand, of waiting for news that never came. He wanted to bolt, to tear the leads off his chest and walk out into the Montana night, back to his farmhouse where the past couldn't reach him. But his body wouldn't let him, and neither would the questions clawing at the back of his mind. "How?" Sam started, then stopped, his jaw tightening as he fought for control. "How'd your dad know know Ben?" The word brother stuck in his throat, too heavy to say out loud. He couldn't look at the nurse as he asked, his eyes fixed on the tiled floor, on the scuff marks and the faint reflection of the fluorescent lights. He didn't want to see pity in this man's face. He didn't want to see anything that might confirm what he already feared, that Ben was gone for good, and all that was left was a story passed down to a stranger. Ben, the nurse, paused, his hand stilling on the clipboard he'd been scribbling on. There was a flicker of something in his expression, maybe uncertainty, maybe recognition of the rawness in Sam's voice. "My dad didn't talk much about the war," he said finally, his tone careful, like he was stepping around broken glass. "But he told me once that during a firefight in the Korangal he got hit, bad, thought he was done for. Then this guy, Ben Whitaker, dragged him out of the line of fire, patched him up enough to keep him breathing until the medevac came. Dad said he owed him everything. Never got to thank him though, never saw him again after that day." Sam's breath hitched. He knew that valley. He'd walked those same jagged paths, heard the same crack of gunfire echoing off the mountains. He could picture it, Ben, always the reckless one, always the first to run toward danger if it meant saving someone else. That was Ben. Stubborn, brave to a fault. Sam's hands clenched into fists, the tremor in them more pronounced now. He wanted to believe it was just the stress, the hospital, the chest pain, but deep down he knew it was more. It was the ache of knowing Ben had saved a life, had left a mark, and yet Sam hadn't been there to save him in return. The guilt was a living thing, coiling tighter around his ribs with every word the nurse spoke. "I'm sorry if this is hard to hear," Ben said, his voice softer now, almost tentative. "I didn't mean to upset you. I've always carried that story with me. It's why I got into nursing, actually, to pay it forward, you know?" Sam didn't respond right away. He couldn't. His mind was a storm of memories. Ben's crooked grin as they signed their enlistment papers, the way he'd hum off key to pass the time on long patrols, the last letter Sam had read over and over until the paper started to fray. "We'll make it back, Sammy. Both of us. Promise." A promise neither of them could keep. And now here was this man, this stranger, carrying Ben's name and a piece of his legacy, while Sam had spent years hiding from it. Hiding from hospitals, from the VA, from anything that might force him to face the truth, that he'd let Ben down. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until a sharp beep from the heart monitor cut through it. Ben glanced at the screen, his brow furrowing. "Your heart rate's spiking a bit. I'm going to get the doctor to take a look." "Hang tight, okay?" He moved toward the door, but Sam's voice stopped him. "Wait." The word came out sharper than he'd intended, laced with a desperation he couldn't hide. Do you know anything else about what happened to him? To Ben?" Ben turned, his hand on the doorframe, and for a moment he looked like he wanted to say more. But then he shook his head. "I'm sorry, sir. That's all my dad ever told me. He didn't know what happened after that day. Just that Ben Whitaker saved his life." He hesitated, then added, "If it means anything, my dad never forgot him, neither will I." The door clicked shut behind him, and Sam was alone again, the hum of the hospital machines filling the void. He stared at the ceiling, the tears pricking at his eyes once more, but this time he didn't let them fall. He couldn't. Not yet. There was too much churning inside him. Grief, yes, but also a flicker of something else. Hope? Anger? He didn't know. All he knew was that for the first time in years, Ben felt close again. Not just a memory, not just a photograph in a cigar box, but a name that still meant something to someone else. And that scared him more than the chest pain ever could. The doctor came in shortly after, a middle-aged woman with a clipped, no-nonsense tone. She talked about tests, EKGs, possible blockages, but Sam barely heard her. His mind was elsewhere, stuck on that name, on the tattoo of the battlefield cross on the nurse's arm, the same one he had on his own shoulder, inked in a moment of raw grief after the army declared Ben MIA. He nodded when the doctor asked if he understood, but his thoughts were 1,000 miles away, back in the Korangal Valley, back to the day he'd last seen his brother alive. They moved him to a different room for observation, a small, sterile space with a window that looked out over the hospital parking lot. Beyond it, he could see the faint outline of the Beartooth Mountains, a rugged silhouette against the evening sky. Montana's landscape had always been his refuge, a place where the vastness could swallow his pain if he let it. But now, even that felt insufficient. The mountains couldn't hide him from this. From Ben's name on a badge, from the story of a life saved, from the questions that were starting to unravel everything he'd tried to bury. A nurse, not Ben this time, brought him a tray of food he didn't touch. The smell of overcooked chicken and instant mashed potatoes turned his stomach, or maybe it was the nausea from earlier creeping back. He pushed the tray aside and reached for the small bag of personal items they'd taken from him when he arrived. His wallet, his keys, a crumpled receipt from the feed store, and tucked into a hidden pocket of the wallet, a folded piece of paper he hadn't looked at in years. Ben's last letter. His hands shook as he unfolded it, the creases worn thin from years of handling. The handwriting was messy, scrawled in a hurry, smudged with what might have been dirt or oil. "Sammy, don't worry about me. I've got a good squad, and we're holding the line. Saw a kid today who reminded me of you, stubborn as hell, always picking fights. Made me laugh. Keep your head down, okay? We'll grab a beer when this is over, promise." Sam's eyes lingered on that last word. The ink faded, but the weight of it as heavy as ever. A promise. One they'd both made, one they'd both broken. He didn't hear the door open at first, too lost in the letter, in the memory of Ben's voice reading it aloud in his head. But then a familiar voice pulled him back. "Sir, I've got your chart updated. We're waiting on a few more test results, but I wanted to check in." Sam looked up to see Ben, the nurse, standing there, clipboard in hand. He quickly folded the letter and shoved it back into his wallet, his movements clumsy, almost protective. "I'm fine," he muttered, though the tremor in his voice said otherwise. Ben didn't push. He adjusted the IV line with practiced ease, his eyes flicking to Sam's face for just a moment. "You know, if you ever want to talk about him, about the Ben Whitaker my dad knew, I'd be happy to listen. I don't know much, but I feel like I owe it to him, to both of you." Sam's jaw tightened, his first instinct to shut down, to build the wall back up. But something in the nurse's tone, in the quiet sincerity of it, stopped him. He thought of his brother, of the way Ben could talk to anyone, make anyone feel like they mattered. Maybe this was his way of reaching out, even now. Maybe this was a chance Sam didn't deserve but couldn't ignore. "I don't know if I can," Sam admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Talking about him. It's like opening a door I can't close again." Ben nodded, as if he understood, though Sam doubted anyone could. "I get it, but sometimes keeping that door shut is what hurts the most. My dad, he didn't talk about the war for years, bottled it all up, almost lost himself to it. It wasn't until he started sharing those stories, even the hard ones, that he started to heal. I'm not saying it's the same for everyone, but I think your Ben would want you to try." The words hit harder than Sam expected, slicing through the numbness he'd wrapped himself in. He thought of the farmhouse, of the quiet mornings with his coffee and the radio, of the way he'd built a life around, avoiding anything that felt too much like living. He thought of the photograph under his bed, of the two boys in uniform grinning like they had all the time in the world. And for the first time in years, he wondered if Ben would be ashamed of the man he'd become, not for surviving, but for stopping there. The nurse stepped back, giving Sam space. "I'll be around if you need anything. Just hit the call button." He paused at the door, then added, "And hey, if you're into stories like this, real, raw stuff, there's a channel on YouTube I follow. They dive deep into veterans' lives, the kind of stuff most people don't talk about. Might be worth a sub if you're ever looking for a connection. Just a thought." Sam didn't respond, but the suggestion lingered as the door closed. He wasn't much for technology, barely knew how to use the ancient flip phone in his pocket, but the idea of other stories, other lives like his, stuck with him. Maybe he wasn't as alone as he thought. Maybe there were others out there carrying names and promises too. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time felt slippery in the hospital with its endless hum of machines and the faint buzz of voices beyond the walls. The test results came back, and the doctor returned with news that wasn't as dire as Sam had feared. A minor blockage, treatable with medication and rest, though they wanted to keep him overnight for observation. He nodded, too drained to argue, though the idea of staying here, surrounded by the ghosts of his past, made his skin crawl. But it wasn't just the hospital keeping him on edge now. It was the letter in his wallet, the name on the badge, the story of a firefight in the Korangal that he couldn't stop replaying. He needed answers, not just about Ben, but about himself, about why he'd spent so long running from the pain when it was the only thing tying him to his brother. And as the night deepened, the decision crystallized, sharp and inevitable. He couldn't leave this hospital without knowing more, couldn't go back to the farmhouse and the quiet rituals that had kept him numb. He had to talk to the nurse again, had to ask the questions he'd been too afraid to voice for 16 years. And if that meant facing the VA, digging into old records, even tracking down this Andrew Gelman who owed Ben his life, then so be it. Because for the first time since he'd come home, Sam Whitaker felt something other than guilt. He felt purpose. He pressed the call button, his hand steady for the first time all night, and waited for Ben, the nurse, not the ghost, to return. When the door opened, Sam looked up, his voice low but resolute. "I've got some things I need to say. About my brother. About what happened. You got time to listen?" The nurse's eyes softened, and he pulled up a chair without hesitation. "I've got all the time you need." And as Sam began to speak, halting at first, then with a quiet intensity that surprised even himself, he felt the weight of 16 years start to shift. Not lift, not yet, but move. Like a stone rolling downhill, slow and heavy, but unstoppable. He didn't know where this would lead, whether to answers, to closure, or to more pain. But for the first time, he was ready to find out. For Ben. For himself. For the promise they'd made under a sky that had seen too much. Sam Whitaker sat in the sterile hospital room, the hum of machines a constant reminder of where he was, a place he'd fought so hard to avoid. The call button had been pressed, and now he waited, his weathered hands folded tightly in his lap, the tremor in them barely noticeable for the first time in hours. He'd made the decision to speak, to finally let the words out after 16 years of silence, and the weight of that choice pressed down on him heavier than the chest pain ever had. The door creaked open, and there was Ben, the nurse, not his brother, stepping in with that same calm, steady presence. His eyes held a quiet understanding, as if he knew the gravity of what Sam was about to do without needing to be told. "I wanted to talk?" Ben asked, pulling the chair closer to the gurney, his voice low, giving Sam the space to back out if he needed to. But Sam didn't. Not this time. His jaw tightened, and he gave a single, sharp nod, his gaze fixed on a spot on the wall just past Ben's shoulder. He couldn't look at him yet, couldn't face the kindness in those eyes while he dug up a grave he'd kept buried for so long. "Yeah," Sam rasped, his voice rough like it hadn't been used in days. "About my brother." "Ben, your name, it ain't just a coincidence, it's his. He was mine, my little brother. And I lost him over there in the Korangal, same place your dad got hit." The words came out jagged, each one cutting deeper as it left him. He paused, his breath hitching, the pressure in his chest building again, but not from any blockage the doctors could find. This was older, raw, a wound that had never healed, only festered beneath the surface. "I ain't talked about him since I got back. Not to the VA, not to anyone. Didn't see the point. He was gone. MIA, they said. Presumed dead. But hearing his name on you, hearing what he did for your dad, it's like he's here, and I can't run from it no more." Ben stayed silent for a moment, letting the weight of Sam's confession settle between them. His hands rested on his knees, still, patient. When he finally spoke, his tone was careful, measured. "I can't imagine what that's like, carrying that for so long. But I'm here. I'll listen. Whatever you need to say, I'm not going anywhere." Sam's throat burned and he swallowed hard, forcing himself to keep going. The tension coiled tighter inside him, every muscle taut as if bracing for a blow. "We enlisted together, same day. I was supposed to look out for him. That's what big brothers do, right? Keep him safe, but I couldn't. We got split into different units, different missions. Last time I saw him, he was laughing, saying we'd grab a beer when it was over. I got his letters for a while, then they stopped. Just stopped. Then the army sent their damn letter missing, no body, no answers, just a folded flag and some officer's sorry face. I came home, and he didn't. I've been carrying that every day since, wondering if I could have done something. If I'd been there, if I'd pushed harder to find him. And now you're telling me he saved your dad, dragged him out of hell, and I wasn't even there to see it. I wasn't there to save him." The words poured out now, a flood he couldn't stop, each one heavier than the last. His voice cracked and his hands clenched into fists, the knuckles white. "I've been hiding from it. From hospitals, from the VA, from anything that smells like war. I thought if I kept moving, kept working the farm, kept my head down, I could outrun it. But I can't. Seeing your name, hearing your story, it's like he's screaming at me to stop running. And I don't know if I'm ready to face it, but I know I can't keep shutting it out. I owe him that much. I owe him more than I can ever give." The air in the room felt thick, suffocating, as if the walls themselves were pressing in with the weight of Sam's guilt. His chest heaved, and for a moment he thought he might break completely, right there in front of this stranger who bore his brother's name. The heart monitor beeped faster, a sharp reminder of his body's limits, but he didn't care. He was on the edge, teetering between the silence he'd clung to and the truth he'd buried, and the fall was coming whether he wanted it or not. Ben leaned forward slightly, his voice steady but laced with something deeper, something personal. "Sam, I don't know what it's like to lose a brother. I can't pretend to, but I do know what it's like to carry a debt you can't repay. My dad felt that every day of his life after the war. He'd wake up in cold sweats reliving that firefight, knowing he only made it out because of your Ben. He'd tell me, 'I got to come home to you because of him. I got to see you grow up.' And it ate at him that he never got to say thank you, never got to find out what happened to him. So I'm saying it now for my dad, for me. Thank you for what your brother did, for the piece of him that's still here because of it. And I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry you've had to carry this alone." Those words hit Sam like a physical force, knocking the air from his lungs. He hadn't expected an apology, hadn't expected anything but his own pain staring back at him. But there it was, sorrow, gratitude, a shared weight in Ben's voice that mirrored his own. For the first time in years, Sam felt seen, not as the broken veteran hiding on a Montana farm, but as a brother, as someone who'd lost everything and still kept going. His eyes burned, and he blinked hard. But the tears came anyway, silent and relentless, tracing lines down his weathered face. He didn't wipe them away. He let them fall, let them carry the grief he'd held so tight it had become part of him. "I ain't been alone," Sam whispered, almost to himself, the words trembling as they left him. "Not really. He's been with me. Every day. In the quiet, in the way the sky looks at dawn, in the way my hands shake when the thunder rolls in. I didn't want to let him go, didn't want to admit he might be gone for good. But hearing what he did for your dad, knowing his name means something to you, it's like he's telling me it's okay, that I don't have to hold on so tight, that he's still here even if it ain't the way I wanted." Ben nodded, his own eyes glistening now, though he kept his composure with the kind of strength that came from years of working in a place where pain was a daily visitor. "He is here, Sam. In the stories, in the lives he touched, in you. My dad used to say that the people we lose never really leave us. They just change shape. They become the way we live, the choices we make. And I think your Ben would be proud of you for sitting here, for talking about him, for letting him be more than a memory you're afraid to touch." The truth of those words settled into Sam like a stone dropping into still water, sending ripples through every part of him. He thought of the farmhouse, of the cigar box under his bed with the photograph of 2 boys in uniform, of the letter he'd unfolded just hours ago. The ink faded, but the promise still sharp. "We'll make it back, Sammy. Both of us. Promise." He hadn't kept that promise, not in the way he'd meant to, but maybe, just maybe, he could keep it now, in a different way. By living, by remembering, by letting Ben's story breathe again, even if it hurt. "I don't know how to do this," Sam admitted, his voice quieter now, the raw edge dulled but still there. "How to live with it without breaking. But I want to try. For him. I've spent too long hiding, too long letting the war take more than it already did. I'm tired, Ben. Tired of running. I want to stop. I want to find out what happened to him, even if it's just a name on a wall or a marker somewhere. I want to know he's at peace, and I want to be too." Ben gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, as if he understood the enormity of what Sam was asking of himself. "That's a start, Sam. A damn good one. And you don't have to do it alone. There are people who can help, VA counselors, support groups, even just folks like me who will listen. My dad found some peace talking to other vets, sharing the hard stuff. It didn't fix everything, but it made the load lighter. And if you want, I can help you start looking for answers about Ben. My dad kept journals from the war. Not much, but there might be something there. Names, dates, anything to point you toward closure." Sam's breath caught at the offer, a lifeline he hadn't expected. The idea of digging into the past terrified him, but it also lit something inside him, a flicker of purpose he hadn't felt since he'd last laced up his boots in the desert. He nodded, slow and deliberate, the decision settling into his bones. "I'd appreciate that, more than you know. I ain't good with words, but thank you for listening, for carrying his name. It means something to me, more than I can say." The room fell quiet again, but it wasn't the suffocating silence of before. It was softer, heavier in a different way, like the quiet after a storm when the air feels new. Sam felt the shift inside himself, a crack in the wall he'd built, letting in just enough light to see by. He wasn't whole, not yet, maybe not ever. But he was here, and for the first time in years that felt like enough. Over the next few days, Sam stayed in the hospital for observation, though the doctors assured him the blockage was manageable with medication and rest. He didn't fight them on it, didn't grumble about the sterile walls or the smell of antiseptic. Something had changed in him, subtle but real. He started small, agreeing to a follow-up with the VA, something he'd dodged for over a decade. He let Ben, the nurse, sit with him during the quiet hours, sharing bits and pieces of his brother's story. The good and the bad, the laughter and the loss. Each word felt like shedding a layer of rust, painful but necessary, scraping away at the numbness until he could feel again. He made a call from the hospital phone, his voice steady, as he left a message for a veteran support group in Billings. "This is Sam Whitaker. I've been out of the game a while, but I'm looking to talk. About my brother. About the war. If you've got a spot, I'd like to come by." He hung up before he could second-guess himself. The act of reaching out feeling like a sacrifice in itself, a renunciation of the solitude he'd clung to for so long. He was giving up the safety of his silence, the comfort of his isolation, for a chance at something he couldn't name yet. Healing, maybe, or just the hope of it. When they discharged him, Ben walked him to the exit, a small gesture that meant more than Sam could express. He handed Sam a folded piece of paper with a phone number and an address. "This is my contact, and my dad's. He's not far from here, just outside Bozeman. He'd want to meet you, I know it. And if you're ever ready to look through those journals, just say the word. We'll do it together." Sam took the paper, his fingers brushing against it like it was something fragile, something sacred. He nodded, unable to find the words, but the look in his eyes said enough. Back at the farmhouse, the air felt different, though nothing had changed on the surface. The creak of the porch swing, the smell of damp earth after a light rain, the distant bark of his old dog. It was all the same, yet it wasn't. Sam stood at the edge of his property that first morning home, facing the horizon as he always did, but this time he didn't turn away when the memories came. He let them wash over him, the good ones and the bad, Ben's crooked grin and the ache of his absence. He pulled the cigar box from under his bed later that day, opening it with hands that didn't shake as much as they used to. The photograph of the two boys in uniform stared back at him, and for the first time in years he didn't hide it away. He set it on the mantel, right next to the window where the morning light would catch it, a quiet act of defiance against the darkness he'd let rule him for too long. Days turned into weeks, and Sam kept moving forward, slow but steady. He drove into Billings for that support group meeting, sitting in a circle of weathered faces that mirrored his own, sharing stories of loss and survival in voices that trembled but didn't break. He called Ben, the nurse, and met with Andrew Gelman, a man whose gratitude and guilt matched Sam's in ways he hadn't expected. They sat on Andrew's porch, two old soldiers with more scars than skin, flipping through faded journals under the weight of a shared past. There were no definitive answers about Ben, not yet, but there were names, dates, fragments of a story Sam hadn't heard before. Enough to keep looking, enough to keep hoping. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the Beartooth Mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet, Sam walked out to the edge of his field with something clutched in his hand. It was a small, tarnished dog tag, one of a pair he and Ben had worn during their deployment, the other lost to time and war. He'd kept it all these years, a tether to a pain he couldn't let go of. Now, he knelt in the soft earth, digging a small hole with his bare hands, the dirt cool against his skin. He placed the tag inside, covering it gently, as if burying a piece of himself alongside it. Not to forget, but to release, to let Ben rest wherever he was, and to let himself live. He stood, brushing the earth from his hands, and looked out at the vast, unending stretch of land before him. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full, heavy with the ghosts of what was, and the promise of what could be. War takes so much, he thought, more than flesh and blood, more than time. It takes the quiet parts of us, the parts that dream, that hope. But sometimes, if we're lucky, if we're brave enough to face the wreckage, it gives something back. Not the same, never the same, but something. A chance to rebuild, a chance to remember without breaking, a chance to start again. If this story of loss and healing, of promises broken and kept, has touched something in you, let us know in the comments. Write, "I believe in second chances," if you felt the weight of carrying on, or if you found a way to let go. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today, someone who might be hiding from their own pain, waiting for a reason to step into the light. And if you want more stories that cut deep and lift you up, hit that subscribe button. We're here to tell the truths that matter, one heartbeat at a time.